It's not very often that you get two introductions at the same Congress, so thanks very much for that. How you all doing? How you all feeling? You've listened really intently to lots of great presentations and hearing about how lots of the telecoms industry are getting themselves really well organised to help enable the M2M market. I thought that we could share a conversation, CGI could bring you a conversation that was about our customers and what our customers are telling us. So I'd like to just show you some of the things that we are doing to get involved in the M2M business and help enable that move forward. So the first thing I haven't done is shamefully have 2 or 3 slides about my company. So I didn't want to do a shameful sales pitch on you. So if I can just introduce CGI. CGI are a large Canadian company. We're the 5th largest IT outsourcing and business processing outsourcing organisation in the world. You might know them if you're from the UK as Logica. CGI bought Logica in July of last year, and really what that's done is it's taken Logica from what was around 41,000 employees to 72,000 employees. We're in 400 offices in 40 countries. And our heritage is actually integration, it's services, it's building big systems that connect to other big systems in lots of different spaces. So my background is telecoms. I've been in telecoms for 20 years and just recently joined a completely different market. But the reason I did that was because I felt like I understood the telecoms part of machine to machine, but I really didn't understand how we could really take it forward from some of the generation 1 and 2 connectivity discussions forward into the Internet of Things, and I wanted to spend my sort of next 10 years looking at how we would do that. So let me just share with you some thoughts. They're not exhaustive, but they're just some of CGI's thoughts and ideas around the market. The screen man coming towards me with a camera. Okay. So what this is really saying is, why do we think that the next big growth sector is going to be the Internet of Things? What is it? Why is it that's going to be an enormous step change from the last 10 years in machine to machine, which has been quite established and quite strong business models in B2B. And what we can see is that there's a huge transformation, and Mark Osborne from National Grid talked earlier on about the transformation that the utilities industry is going through. And we hear from customers like Mark, but in other sectors. In the transport sector, I don't know if you can see that at the back, but the slide at the top is really looking at how complex and diverse the energy sector, the consumer sector, the healthcare sector, transport, utilities, retail, they're all transforming enormously. So we've really been thinking about how does that work for customers when they're trying to put an end-to-end solution together. They've got to have all of the comms working, they've got to have all of the capabilities working right through their end-to-end solution, through their systems, through their business processes and all of that. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of data that they're using, there's a lot of data they're not using, they might need it in the future. It's a bit confusing, but one of the key themes that we landed on was around communications. And when we've been deploying very large systems throughout the world on machine to machine, we've found that it's not just one technology. Now, GSM is obviously going to play an enormously important part, and we've spent probably half of the conference first day really looking at the important part that GSM and mobile operators play and how that evolves and is established through alliances and things, which is hugely valuable. And Mark Overton talked about the size and scale and the ambition that EE have. And we heard from Uncle Garcia at Telefonica how they're organising the landscape to work together and collaborate and make things easier for the customer. And we're going to hear from Joel Schroeder from Inmarsat in a couple of presentations' time. And Joel's really looking at the SATCOM side of things. But coming from a Canadian company, there's been quite large deployments of mesh technology, and some of the competitive business that we see in the UK now, especially around the utility sector, is looking at actually which is the best technology. It's quite critical, it's got to be cost effective, and it's quite difficult for customers to bring that all together. So the debate that we're having is how do you bring that all together in perhaps one comms module or one capability for a customer. And I'll talk about that a little bit. We've called that heterogeneous networks, but it just means that, sort of a blend of things that customers need. So our way of bringing that together is actually through service enablement, and I know that Emmanuel just talked about the importance of service enablement and that layer, and we see that as a really critical, important part of the whole ecosystem as a key enabler. Whilst CGI have built two of the largest comms communications connectivity platforms in the world, two of which have been referenced today, that's not where necessarily we see ourselves in competing. We've built those, the IP belongs to those organisations and gives us a huge proof point and pedigree and understanding of what connectivity means, but it's the next layer up, that layer above connectivity and below value-added services that actually is really exciting and interesting for customers. And the last thing that we're hearing from customers is just how digital retailing of the future is going to work. And again, Mark Osborne talked about some of the services that National Grid might want to bring to customers, perhaps even through smartphones, using quite large systems in the back office to get new digital services to customer. That's an enormous change. And if we just look at the downside of digital for a second, or the pitfalls of digital services, we only have to look at the retail and high street to see what challenges we're facing as countries and cities. And Kodak, 133 years I think they were in business, found that an enormous challenge and went into administration, as did Jessop's, which is a large UK brand in the photography industry as well, if you're not from the UK or not familiar with the brand. And really looking at those as examples, how could they have changed? What if they had changed their business models? And if we look at each of the different sectors, that close relationship with your customers when you've got big systems and you're quite far away from becomes a real reality. So there's perhaps some new digital retailers of the future that we haven't seen today. And I'd just like to share with you a short video which is aimed at not just bringing digital women, because there aren't so many women at these events. I had to bring them digitally. But if you look behind the female element, and you'll understand what I mean in a second, to the back office and how that brings all the things that are happening behind the scenes and all the information and data, bringing that into real world. So we just wanted to bring you a new conversation about that. So I'm going to ask my new friend Rob, our digital graphics director, to run the VT. So, I'm sure whether you like that or not. But I thought she looked great in the blue as well. So that's a wee look at a potential future. Probably not that far off, and a lot of that exists today. Just one thought before we move forward into the future. There's a really special birthday this year. Does anybody know who's celebrating their 40th? Actually, we all are, because it's 40 years this month, isn't it, since the mobile industry made its first telephone call, and I couldn't move forward without taking a nod back and having a quick look in terms of the generations that we've gone through. I've had the great privilege for the last 10 years of leading an M2M business and being surrounded by some fantastically brilliant people who have helped make the last 10 years hugely interesting, but to really help drive the M2M growth. And when we started off, it was wholesale connectivity. That's still a really relevant business model today, but it was not dedicated, there was no service. Customers, got a voice experience that was trying to be something else. I think that's got really, really huge parallels for the future for Internet of Things as well. When we hear about sort of Generation 2, we're really thinking about wholesale connectivity and some really dedicated architecture. And we've heard from some of the future architecture of how that's going to be dedicated, in particular from the alliances and the programmes that are happening, be it the Multi-Network Alliance or be it the GMA. I think there's quite a lot of really interesting parallels there. Generation 3, well, that's really been about the last 3 years, connectivity platforms and developing connectivity services. But that's about scale, isn't it? If you think you're something different, feel free to throw rocks at it. But it feels to me as if it's about scale. It's about not having to phone up customer services to find out where that SIM card is. You can't do that, can you, when you've got millions of devices out there? Generation 4, partner ecosystem, starting to sound really familiar. Value-added services, we've heard loads about that today, and service enablement services. Now, for me, that's where I feel like CGI are, and it's certainly where a lot of the customers see the market. And Generation 5, this heterogeneous networks, lots of different types of communications needing to connect into service enablement layer. Service enablement's still quite new, and we're going to need to do a lot of things with it, and we're going to have speed, because as the technology grows, we know that the technology timeline speeds up, so we're going to have to do it quite quickly as well. Digital services and applications with the growth of the smartphone and 40 years of mobile, it's growing enormously. And the smartphone is growing in not just developed countries, and emerging markets as well. It's absolutely huge, and that pace and that rate of change is just speeding up all the time. So the other big theme for Generation 5 is city regions, with I think the prediction of 70% of the population by 2050 being in 25 megacities, I think is the figure. So that's an enormous challenge, and lots of cities looking to develop things. And Glasgow, I've got to give them a plug because I'm from there, winning the Future Cities, have an enormous challenge. They have an enormous budget, but they also have an enormous challenge. So what does smart city, future cities really look like for them? There's lots of countries all over the world, and I'm sure you've got examples for all of your own countries of what's going on there. We saw that lovely video from Turkcell. I thought that was an excellent way of bringing that to life from Selene earlier on. So that was just a little nod to the past before we jump forward to the future. I think I have to point to some RF going on. So very quickly, because I think I'm all that stands between you and a cup of coffee. City regions transport and, in fact, energy, the key drivers there that we hear from customers all the time are really about how they can, and we've heard it again from Mark and National Grid. I think that was excellent, because that's been the one presentation today that's really drawn out that transformation and what's happening, but that transformation to a low carbon economy, and what that means for cities. As we have more population, we've got waste to manage, water to manage, energy to manage. They're completely different ecosystems today, so how does all that come together? And a point one of my colleagues made earlier on about, it takes time. I think Emmanuel made the point, in fact, from Orange Business Systems, it takes time to put ecosystems together, and that can slow things down as well. So we've got to keep looking forward to how we can help enable that grow more quickly. And then the second big theme that we hear from both these particular industries, just two examples that I've just picked them because there's just too many to look at, but that economic growth and productivity. And for certain cities, I'm not sure if it's the same for everyone, certainly the ones that we've spoken to that are quite large cities, they want to create jobs. We've got this huge problem with unemployment, haven't we? So they want to create jobs and bring jobs to the area. That means a road transport infrastructure. That means getting unemployed people that are perhaps a bit socially excluded at times to the right areas at the right times with the right transport networks, giving them the right choices, perhaps giving them incentives, coupons, those types of things. And that's where we see perhaps applications and services driven out of completely new places, digital retailing in a completely different way. And we're talking about transport infrastructure companies that are used to big systems, sluggish, slow moving perhaps at times, becoming digital retailers of the future. That's a huge opportunity and a great thing if we can achieve it. So what are the things that both industries suffer from? And in transport in particular, we look at overcrowding on routes. If you follow my Twitter feed, I'm constantly on the Twitterati to First Great Western, and actually just by giving a bit of feedback on the overcrowding, they've changed in the last 2 weeks. My 7:31 from Maidenhead to Paddington was full of angry customers shouting at each other, and mainly because it was 3 coaches for hundreds of people, and they've changed it up to 6, and that wasn't enough, and they've changed it to 9 now. And I actually got a seat yesterday, which was amazing. So actually the power of social media in real life. Travel options are quite low, especially in times of disruption. Incentives, Mark talked about that earlier on as well, a real challenge. Perceived lack of quality in public transport. I think with social media, people will be able to give very direct feedback. And those industries will have to transform very quickly, especially where there's competition, which is a really good thing for the citizen and the consumer. So just coming back to those 2 key things, low carbon economy and economic growth. Just have a quick deep dive into some of the things that CGI has been trying to do to get involved. Take reference to Mark, actually, it's about the 4th time I've mentioned it, but he mentioned the Low Carbon Network Fund. There's a little link at the bottom there if you're interested in the Low Carbon Network Fund. And it's a fund that CGI have used in collaboration with all of these organisations. And the key reason that we got involved in that is a £500 million fund. Unfortunately, we didn't get to spend all of that, but we got a little bit of it to spend in London. And it was really designed to learn what transformations needed to happen, what were the business process changes that need to change. How do we need to work together? How does that ecosystem, all the things we've been talking about today, for us, this is real, it's in London, it's today, it's government funded, it's all of the things that we talk about at conferences all of the time. And our role within that was data services, carbon accounting, some design and consultancy work. But the benefits were absolutely huge. And in fact, it's been recognised as an exemplar smart grid project. So if you'd like to know a little bit more about that, then there's just a link there. This one is shameful, and I apologise in advance, is shameful publicity stunt for my company. If you're interested in learning a bit more about the British, these are written for Great Britain. They probably apply to other markets. We've written some dummies guides. I certainly needed it for smart metering, smart grids, nuclear power, which I found particularly challenging, and asset management. So you can download any of those, or if you'd like a copy, and I can help you with that, please just give me your card after or at the break. But I hope you enjoy those. Very quickly, just moving on to the second element, we talked about low carbon fund being one of the big challenges, the second big challenge being a growth strategy and an economic growth strategy at that. So again, bringing those jobs, road infrastructure. So what we can see is that a lot of the road network is not interconnected, and we know that that's the future because we've read enough papers on it, and we've seen enough stuff to know that that's what's coming. There's lots of services out there, bus stops, traffic lights, roads themselves, gantries, infrastructure of some sort, ANPR cameras, inductive loops. Inductive loops is an interesting one because you've got to dig up the road. Half of it doesn't work most of the time, so the accuracy of data can be a real challenge. Then if we kind of go up to the middle of the pyramid, we're looking at effective space management. So this is about sort of making sure that we can optimise the public transport system. And when we look at some of the challenges that causes for customers, they've actually got all these different systems, all the bus stops, traffic lights, all the things that they're trying to manage on behalf of us as we travel around our cities and towns. And their challenge is they've got to create a new back office infrastructure every single time they want to deliver a new service as CapEx. They need the OpEx to go with that. They've got to fight for the budget. They've got to get the resources with the right skills at the right time to do the job. And then they've got to manage and maintain it. So quite often when we go into a large transport infrastructure organisation, we can see just reams and teams of people on lots of different floors that don't talk to each other perhaps, but they have to do a common job for the end customer, but they're not interconnected. I mean, I don't know how many of you have got apps that you've got to get the train timetable from one, but you get the underground information from another. If anybody's got an app that brings them all together and the walking directions, I'd love it. I find it really challenging in the morning when we're in a rush and all of that. So if we think about that in a digital world, the real world of that is lots of different departments managing lots of different infrastructure. So there's great economies of scale there, but by bringing them together, creating a completely different experience with the customer. So that kind of takes us up to the traveller experience, and we've obviously got ticketing and how the smartphone and mobile money and mobile ticketing and all that fits together, but that all contributes to that end customer experience and huge transformation. So let me just finish up by saying that CGI service enablement layer, for us that's what brings it all together. We can connect into multiple device management platforms and connectivity platforms. We can bring all that together through that business enablement layer. I'm not going to talk through it, other than to say it's all about sensors and devices. It's about connecting them, but our bit is that bit of managing it, of taking the data. Perhaps we don't always know what the data is that we're going to need in a couple of years' time, but rather than wasting it, we can warehouse it and perhaps use it later. And maybe creating new applications out through web servers, both for internal departments, for third parties who want travel information, as the abuse of travel management is an example here, but we can apply this to pretty much any of the horizontal and vertical services, and creating new applications for customers. So let me just sum up. Dramatic transformation in every sector. Lots of different blended technologies needed to bring it together, and we believe that the right way to do that is through the service enablement layer and enabling the ecosystem of partnerships, and creating a new digital retailer of the future. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I think I'm on the panel later, so I'll perhaps take any questions then, and perhaps introduce the next speaker.
That's it. Thank you very much, Gilli. That was Gilli Coston from CGI.